The Daily Wire has the update. The Washington, D.C. medical examiner said that it will not be performing autopsies on bodies of aborted babies that were turned in to police last week. Pro-life activists and medical professionals say that the bodies show signs of illegal and gruesome abortion procedures, and these activists fear that the bodies will be incinerated before proper autopsies can be conducted. Live Action's Director of Government Affairs told the Daily Wire on Monday, quote, "One of the worst injustices would be if the medical examiner and D.C. government dispose or incinerate the bodies of these children before a full autopsy can be completed." He said, quote, "The abortionists do not want autopsies performed because they may indicate violations of federal law. D.C. must preserve these remains until a full, fair, and thorough investigation can be completed." Now, to remind you about the story, this is a pro-life group, I forget the name of it, the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising Group. One of the members of that group obtained the bodies of 5 children who were victims of abortion and obtained these bodies from a whistleblower, apparently, within the clinic. And according to that whistleblower, these babies were killed in illegal procedures, whether it's partial birth abortion, which is supposedly illegal, or even there's evidence that you can plainly see if you see the pictures, as many people did as over the weekend, the kind of pictures that are seared into your mind forever and you never forget. But you can plainly see the evidence that even potentially these were abortions that occurred after birth. Now, by the way, the distinction between a partial birth abortion and an after birth abortion, a post-birth abortion, are semantics at best. Partial birth abortion, the baby is being killed as he emerges from the birth canal. Like part of his body is out of the birth canal, and then his skull is crushed, or something. Basically, a vacuum is stuck into his skull, and his brains are sucked out of his body. I mean, that's how these procedures are carried out. That's the reality of it. So that's partial birth, which was legal in this country for a long time. Now it's supposedly illegal. And then after birth abortion, or post-birth abortion, is infanticide, in other words, is just wait for the baby to fully emerge and then kill it. There's no moral distinction at all between the two. There's no medical distinction or physical distinction either. Certainly no scientific distinction. So there's evidence that this is what happened to these babies. The police, once the pro-life group obtained the bodies of these victims, they contacted the police and said, "We come pick them up." And so far, the police are saying, "We're not going to investigate," which, like we talked about yesterday, whether we're talking about abortion victims or anything else, you're given the bodies of 5 dead people. Wouldn't you want to do an autopsy to figure out how they died? Isn't that the first thing you would do? Well, not according to the police anyway. Here's Executive Assistant Chief of Police Sean Benedict explaining that although they were just made aware of these victims, they still have just decided already that everything is fine and there's really nothing to investigate. Listen.
In regards to the house that was found with numerous fetuses today, can you confirm if that is the home of Lauren Handy's, and do you have any idea on how those fetuses got there, and if you all have been working with other authorities across the country?
Sure. So there's 2 different things going on here. Ms. Handy has been indicted in a federal investigation led by the FBI that MPD was not a part of. So that's number one. The second piece is that we were led to that house that you mentioned. We did recover items that were, these are preliminary results. OCME took a look at those items. They have been confirmed as fetuses. What we're seeing now is those fetuses were aborted in accordance with DC law. So we are not investigating this incident along those lines. Doesn't speak anything criminal in nature right now about that, except for how they got into this house. And so we'll continue to look at that.
Are you working with authorities in other states with how they got here to the DC area?
This is very early on, and I think the FBI's case may touch on interstate, but at this point, we're about a day into this.
I don't know, if that doesn't make your blood boil, then you have no soul. He's referring to dead children, dead babies, as items. He says, oh, we obtained the items. Well, I ask you, would he ever talk about the victims of a car crash or a mass shooting. If there's a mass shooting at a mall somewhere, and he's talking about recovering the bodies, would he say, oh yeah, well, we obtained 15 items? That's how he's talking about these children, because he does not recognize the children as being human beings. He doesn't recognize them as people. And as far as he's concerned, even though you have 5 children who have been brutally killed, for him, the only crime worth investigating is not how they were killed, but how they were discovered. The crime is in the discovering of the crime. Pretty common theme when it comes to the abortion industry. Like we talked about yesterday, it's the same thing with the Center for Medical Progress when they conducted an undercover investigation and revealed that Planned Parenthood was chopping up babies and harvesting their organs and selling them for parts like an old vehicle or something, and the crime there was not that this was happening, it's that the Center for Medical Progress found out about it. So they're the criminals. Talk about shooting the messenger, almost in a literal sort of way. And he's just decided that we're not even going to look into it. All they did, well, they haven't done an autopsy. So this was just sort of the naked eye test. They looked at the bodies and said, no illegal abortion. There is no way to know that. They cannot possibly know it. No, it's quite the opposite. They're afraid that there was something illegal that happened, and that if they do the autopsy, they'll discover it, and they will have to prosecute a prominent abortionist in the city, which they refuse to do. Because the abortion industry is basically a quasi-governmental agency at this point. It is protected by the government and funded by the government as if it is the government, as if it's part of the government. And the only hazard in this conversation, and we should be calling, this is something, all conservatives, I don't care if you're conservative, just if you're a decent person, you should be demanding that this is at least investigated. There's no reason why you wouldn't do an autopsy. What, you just don't feel like it? You got better things to do? You don't have time? The only reason to do it is that you are blatantly trying to cover up a crime. And every decent person should be demanding that that doesn't happen. The only hazard in this conversation is that it obscures the point that even if these were, quote, legal abortions, it's still a horrific crime. Maybe not according to the law books, but that's because the law books themselves are twisted. And the law books need to be changed. So there's a crime, at least a horrific moral crime that occurred one way or another. But either way, there needs to be an investigation. I don't know how I'm still shocked by this kind of thing, somehow. Just that they could be so out in the open about it. You might as well hold a press conference and just say to the press that, hey, listen, we're not interested in prosecuting abortionists here. That's not what we do. So whatever he did, we're not looking into it. You might as well say that. They have all but said that. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.